Hey, Canucks fans, I am thrilled to welcome my next guest, someone that I've wanted to have on here for a long time. Listen to him almost on a daily basis, and now he's here with all of us. Please say hello to Mr. Andrew Walker. Hello, Andrew.
Hey man, how's it going? It's great to be on. Earlier you kind of like introduced yourself, but I'm very well aware of who you are, and I've watched your stuff, and I've watched some of your shows too. So
Well, I appreciate that.
Very familiar. Happy to do it.
Oh, thanks, Andrew. That's great. Well, what a crazy time. First and foremost, we'll forget about all the questions I'm going to ask you. How are you doing? How are you keeping up? We're a year into this thing now.
Yeah, almost there. Hey, yeah, you know what? I like everybody up and down. We're working from home. It's crazy that it's been about a year now.
Yeah.
And I listen, there's been some good stuff. I think I think the good stuff will happen when we all get back to normal. I think people hopefully will have a little bit of appreciation for different things. I know I will. And there's some self-realization and self-improvement that goes on and all that kind of stuff. So I'm over it though. For sure. I'm ready to get back to normal and, feel like, especially in the sports world, feel like everything's normal again. But hey, I can be patient if everyone else can. So.
Well, I appreciate that. I want to ask you a couple of things about that. Amidst all these changes throughout the world, one thing that's been constant is your show. You've been there the whole time. You've had a couple of guests who I want to get into, but what's the biggest challenge, Andrew, from doing your show, the program from home?
I think the biggest thing is just mentally, like just feeling radio's tough anyway, because sometimes you feel like you're doing it for nobody or like, you're in a studio and you forget that at various times there's, thousands of people listening, and in some markets and something like tens of thousands are on, and that feeling is amplified when you're at home, because I'm doing it from my kitchen table. I'm looking out on my patio, right? So like, I can't see Sat, I can't see Bick. It feels very detached. I think a lot of our job is putting on like being an actor, and in a lot of ways, and that kind of adds to it.
Right. And people that watch my channel, they know I have a massive respect for guys like you, ladies like in the industry. It's something. I'm 46 years old, so it's not something I aspire to do, but I do like these chats where I get to know. And I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to the technical side. How do you and Sat just know who's going to go next? Are you texting on WhatsApp, or even so you're not talking over each other all the time?
We do have a WhatsApp group chat, and some of it is formulaic, in the sense when we're doing an interview or something, we kind of just know. We'll talk about stuff beforehand. A lot of, 95% of it is unscripted, and you just kind of go where the wind takes you. But let's say we have Jim Benning on or something like that, and I'll be like, hey, like I want to ask about this, and Sat's like, oh, I want to throw these few questions kind of in a row on this topic, and so we have a good idea anyway. But a lot of that is, I really appreciate the chemistry with Sat as it exists anyway. So a lot of that is feel, you get used to it, but it's actually a big compliment if someone listens to the show and says, oh man, I assumed you guys were in studio and
right.
in studio together. And it's like, that's pretty good if it sounds that way and we're both in our own condos.
Yeah, that chemistry must come from just and trust. Obviously, you kind of get a sense of how many questions you're gonna go with in a row and that kind of thing. Really, because I've been blessed with the opportunity to chat with both Sat and Scotty, so I wanted to get to you to finish off the trifecta. But so I love both of those guys. What's the biggest difference between working with both of them? And you can be complimentary to both, but just what's one difference that people might appreciate working with Scotty firstly, and now with Sat?
Yeah, not better or worse, but Scotty and I were definitely, and we definitely were from different worlds, on the show, and it was a very, he's married guy, North Van, long time, kids, all that kind of stuff, and I was the younger, not that young, but younger single guy, and that was kind of the opposites attract kind of mix. And the difference with Sat and I do, and throw Dick, our producer, in there as well, we're all kind of in the same wheelhouse.
Yeah.
There's not some big complex difference, and maybe that doesn't, it's not totally inclusive if someone is, older, married, living with kids. He doesn't have that outlet on the show or that voice to represent him. But I think that's the biggest difference, where Scotty and I were kind of from different worlds. I think right now Sat and I are a very like mind, which, I mean, it works both ways.
Yeah. So older, local, and married with kids. So that means there is a chance for me after all.
Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, you're young. You're young for the broadcasting biz. You could swing right in.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
All right, but I would love to talk a bit about your journey to Vancouver. Many people know, or they like to bring up, which I'll get to in a second, that you're not from here. So maybe you can tell us a bit about your journey, how you got to Vancouver, Andrew.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I get it all the time, the Toronto stuff, and people, get their backs up because I did work in Toronto for a little bit. But just recently, I've officially lived in Vancouver longer than I lived in Toronto.
There you go. Congratulations.
So, yeah. So, I mean, now the criticism is, I'm sure people will just drop it forever because the criticism is null and void. No, I was born and raised in Saskatchewan, is where I'm from. And I didn't necessarily, I wasn't like a radio or broadcast fan or a nerd, like, some guys, a lot of guys in the industry. I mean, even guys like Shorthouse, right? Like they did their own little private shows on their recorders in their bedroom, right? And I was never like that at all. And I went to broadcasting school kind of on a whim because I was like, well, I mean, I'm not good enough to play sports. Like maybe I can cover sports, or I think growing up in Saskatchewan, the idea was I wanted to be Darren Petition on the desk, right, on the sports desk. He's a Porcupine Plains, Saskatchewan guy, and he was, I mean, and he's still in the same gig, right? He's done it for 30 years since the inception of TSN. So the original idea was, yeah, I'll wear a suit, I'll do the highlights like Dutch, and those jobs are, I don't want to say obsolete, but they're less meaning to that job now than when it was like, Olbermann and Dan Patrick doing it for ESPN.
Sure.
Those guys are superstars. So I went to broadcast school, and I was actually a pretty shy kid, pretty introverted, pretty quiet. And I don't know, I just, I was there for a few months, and I just kind of was a natural at it, I guess. Certainly compared to the people I was in class with. And I mean, so yeah, I thought I was pretty hot shit in broadcast school. But yeah, from there, I got my first job in 2002, 2003 in North Battleford, Saskatchewan, doing news and a little bit of sports when they let me do it. It's some SJHL stuff. And then I moved to Red Deer in 2004. Mm-hmm. So that was like right after the Flames had kind of done their miracle run, and then the NHL lockout.
Right.
And I was doing sports and the Red Deer Rebels broadcasts in Red Deer, and I was there for about 6 years. And that was a spot where I really kind of grew up and made my mistakes and kind of learned, what I was doing or what I was as a broadcaster. And then Sportsnet hired me in Calgary in 2010. And so that was the first time I really got into kind of like the actual talk element of it, rather than doing, pregame shows or sports updates or, that kind of stuff. So I lived in Calgary and worked at Sportsnet 960 for about 3 years. I did the morning show there. And then that's when Toronto came calling in 2013. Actually, the plan was I was going to move here. I don't know if you knew this. I flew out twice and interviewed with 1040. And it was going to be when Bro Jake did the show, it was going to be Bro Jake and me.
Wow. No, I did not know that.
Yeah. So it was, Mike Whittingham was a big part of that. And I felt, so I flew out, and they were sending me the contract, and I was going to go. And then, Sportsnet obviously got wind of it, and Don Collins was the PD at 590. And listen, 590 is a beast, right? It's one of the biggest stations in North America. And so he called me one day and said, "Hey, listen, I know you're close to Vancouver and it's probably going to happen, but he's like, come here instead." And it was Toronto, right? It's the Blue Jays, it's the Raptors, it was all that. And so I did, and it was really tough telling Mike here that I wasn't going to come. And then they eventually hired Dave Pratt to work with Bro Jake. But yeah, it was really close. I was going to come here in 2012 2017. Instead, I went, or sorry, 2013.
Yeah.
Instead, I went to the Fan in Toronto, and I was there for 4 years, and then Sportsnet decided to launch the station out here. And I don't know, ever since that moment, I always did want to move and live in Vancouver. I do love this city, and yeah, the timing was right, so I came out here, and here we are.
Well, fascinating. Thank you for walking us through that. I did not know about the Bro Jake show. Bro Jake and Andrew.
Yeah.
Wow. So
I didn't really spread that around, but I think now, I mean, unfortunately with 1040, so I think it's kind of up for grabs, up for discussion. But yeah, I don't think a lot of people really know that.
You know what's fascinating, and I'm not just saying this. There was although I officially met you a couple of years ago at the Canucks Dice and Ice, there was an event 2 years prior to that. I think just as you got here, it was at Rogers Arena. It was for a bunch of media guys. It was the Canucks hosting it. Lyndon was there. And then they put a bunch of these wannabe vloggers in there like me. And then I didn't meet you, but I remember asking people, who is that? Because you came in, sharply dressed, looking good. And then you seem to know a lot of people already. And Sportsnet, though, just was getting off the ground. So maybe, I don't know if you made a lot of contacts prior to that because of that TSN recruiting or whatever, but you just seem to be pretty well connected already, even though your show was just getting off the ground at the time.
Yeah, boy, it's tough to. I don't really remember specifically, but I did know a few guys at 1040, and I was buddies with Botch. It's another thing. I don't think people just assume we hated each other, but he was a good friend of mine. And I mean, I can't remember who was there, but Ray Ferraro is one of my best friends on the planet, and so he's been nice to have in the market. I've known guys like Murph for a long time. Yeah. It's a small industry, really, at the end of it, especially in the sports realm.
So that's pretty cool. 4 years in Toronto, now just over 4 years here. In Toronto, were you doing all the big ones, the Blue Jays, Raptors, and Leafs, or did you focus on one of the three more?
Well, the interesting thing about that, and why I did really love working in a market that size, it's because, like, here is very much more, Canadiana, and I appreciate that, where Toronto feels like a big American city at times. But when I was there, here it's the Canucks and basically just the Canucks, right? Maybe a little bit of Seahawks, let's be honest. Yeah. And there it just all depends, right? So I moved there in 2013, and then in about 2015 is when the Blue Jays blew up, right? And so for about a year and a half, you'd go into work and you just flip on the mic and you'd be like, all right, Blue Jays. And it's just like, that's all people wanted to talk about. Right. And then they go through that cycle. And then after that died down. And the last year I'm not there anymore, but it would be all Raptors. And when the Leafs drafted Austin Matthews, the focus changes. So there's always something. And what the crazy days are when they're all kind of doing something at the same time. And then you just don't, shows are easy because you just got to like cut out stuff to talk about. Right. Yeah,
that's a great point. And that leads me to really, nicely into my next question is, we think that this is a crazy sports town here. And you're right. It's really the Vancouver Canucks and then it's Seahawks, Lions, and Whitecaps a little bit after that. In Toronto, you have all those things. What's something, what's a comparable is the sports market here, the media market and the fan market here in Vancouver. Is it like Toronto light? Is it as rabid as Toronto? Is it crazier than Toronto? Give us some perspective.
So I don't even mean this in a negative way. People will probably take it negatively, but Vancouver, it's not a great sports town. Mm-hmm. All things considered. It's a really good hockey town for sure. And listen, sports fans love sports. I understand that. But here there's always a little something to do, right? Like people like the Lions and like the Canadians and like the Whitecaps, but everything is just so far removed from the passion of the Canucks. But I will say, when it comes to the Canucks, especially, as you know, the social media aspect of it, the involvement, the Vancouver Canucks Twitter, good and bad, is on a different level. And it seems like every fan I was talking about on the show today, I was like, everybody has a podcast, and some do it better than others, but like everyone wants to be in that sphere. And so Vancouver does that very elite. But it's not a great sports town. I've lived in and worked in better, if that makes sense. I don't mean it as an insult. It means people have other stuff to do, I guess.
Right. No, that's totally fair. And I've I said this before I press record. I've always appreciated your honesty, and I think sometimes your honesty, for better for worse, admittedly gets you not in trouble, but people have this perception of Andrew Walker. Or, yeah, he's the Toronto guy, or he doesn't know anything about this market, or he doesn't care to love this market. Well, how do you like that kind of thing? Does it bother you? Do you know it comes with the territory? How does it feel when you hear that kind of stuff?
It does come with the territory. I think I probably get a little bit of hazard pay, because of it. So I'm willing to suck it up. The thing is, I was always I could be a little bit controversial or whatever in my other stops, but it was never public enemy number one or anything like that. And then I'll be honest, when I signed in Vancouver and I decided to move out, and I was leaving a pretty good show in Toronto to move to an expansion radio station in Vancouver.
Yeah.
No insult to anybody here working in the media, but I was kind of under the impression, I'm like, I'm good at what I do. Like, Vancouver's going to be like lucky to have me, and they're going to appreciate me because I want to live here. Like, I'm good at what I do.
Yeah.
I'm going to come in, I'm going to give the market another good voice and a good show. And I'm choosing, like, I'm a free agent and I'm choosing to live in this city. And so, not that I was going to be the conquering hero or anything, but I really kind of thought that I was going to be embraced. And then a couple of bloggers or whatever, dug up some tweets and wrote some stories and made me look, like, I don't know, whatever. It happens. Yeah. And it was my first experience with, I remember I came out and Scotty and I went on breakfast television and we announced the station or whatever. And then I flew home and my phone was off. And when I opened my phone, I had 7,000 Twitter notifications, 7,000. And most of them were just like saying awful shit, as you can imagine. And I had put up with stuff like that before, but never in that way. And so I didn't love it. I mean, no one loves to read that stuff about you, about yourself. But I quickly realized it was kind of like, I didn't ask for this, but it, and then Botch got a hold of it. And then that's kind of how it really took off. And it was like, hey, everyone's on Botch's side and here's Walker on the other side. And I don't regret it. I think it's great. Everybody knew who I was in the market right away. It saved me like 2 years of, trying to, build my brand or whatever you call it. But, so it was good, but I kind of was like, I didn't come in trying to be the villain. I was like, oh my God, I guess I'm the villain. And it worked because our station is full of really nice guys, right? Like Scott Rintoul's a nice guy. Like, he's not gonna fire and brimstone or carve people. Cebulski's not gonna do it. Sat's awesome. He's not gonna do that. So I'm kind of like, well, I guess that's me. And it's okay. Like, but I will admit, like, it all depends on, I think some of it's undeserved and some of it, for sure. There's some, I feed into it. There's some trolling or whatever, but there's the odd time that you're having a bad day, right? And you're just not feeling it. And you open I open my DMs and, people are just like, I don't know if I can swear or whatever, but people are in your DMs like, I wish you got fired. I wish you, and that it can wear on you sometime, but you have to, you have to just realize it comes with the territory, I guess.
Yeah, no, I appreciate. Thank you very, very much for your honest and vulnerable answer. It's interesting that I can't remember if I pressed record already. You said that you and Botch were actually really close friends. Is that from the Toronto days?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I wouldn't say best friends or anything like that. I knew Botch. We talked here and there. We were similar in a lot of ways. I really respected how he just kind of developed, and he developed the market and developed himself in the market and became this star, this guy that set the narrative. And then when I moved out here, the first guy I met up with was Botch, and we became pretty good friends after that. And unfortunately, I didn't get that length of time to get to know him like I should.
Sure. Yet when he made you one of his recurring characters in his post-game articles, I guess a lot of people didn't know that there was actually some fun in that, as opposed to him really going after you.
Yeah, well, anytime that we were really getting into it, and you can probably just go back and read the Twitter threads or whatever, but anytime we were going into it, we also we're also going back and forth on text, right? I think there was one time that Sportsnet was kind of down my neck a little bit because they were a little worried about how heated I was getting, and I told Botch one time, I'm like, hey, like, you got to stop going after me on this, because like I'm gonna push back on you, and I'm not supposed to right now. So
Right.
Yeah, but that was about it.
Oh, cool story. So from 2010, Red Deer, as you said, to 2013 Toronto, 2017 now Vancouver, 2017 and onwards. How has Andrew Walker changed as a broadcaster, as a host in those 11, 12 years?
Wow. I mean, I'm really right now. I'm really comfortable in the sense of I've just done it for so long that I don't have, I don't know, like for instance, like right now, if all of a sudden I found out that we're on a live national broadcast, it's like, hey, like you got to do 3 hours and start talking. It doesn't bother me, it doesn't rattle me, it doesn't faze me, and it for a long time, and I think you can be in this industry for 30 years. And people still kind of like stiffen up when the mic comes on and act all like broadcasty and official. And it just takes, it's the easiest thing to explain in the world is just be yourself, right? Like how you are in person, how you are talking to somebody, just flip on the mic. Like I know people don't like everything he does, but I think Ron McLean is the master at that. He's like talking, mic goes on, and he's just the exact same, right? Just the same cadence and whatever. I think I've gotten better at that. I'm not perfect, but I think if you listen to our show, we're just talking, right? It's just guys talking. So there's so many lessons along the way. I pick my battles better. That's a personal thing. Because back in I'm mid-20s, I'm doing talk radio, and you just want to you want people to take you seriously, and you want to be respected, and you don't want to be the young guy. You want to be. And so you sometimes pick battles you shouldn't because you want respect and things like that, or you want to like, oh, I got to come up with a hot take, and no, you don't. You just those come naturally when you're having fun and being thoughtful.
That's a great point. If you're passionate and you know what you're talking about, I think those hot takes or those takes even are going to come naturally. I love what you said, Andrew, about just being yourself, because I always say there's a lot of room, in this market for content creators. And you talked about it. You said you're talking about the plethora of Canucks podcasts or vloggers. And I admit, I got a little scared when I found out Rob Fay was going to do a post-game thing on YouTube. I thought that's what I do, but I recognize that no, there's plenty of eyeballs and plenty of ears for sure for that kind of thing.
Well, competition is good. And what you need to do is pick a fight with Rob Fay and say something shitty about him on the air, and then everyone goes back and forth to find out what the rebuttal is going to be. That's how rap music stations in New York became big, right? Because the DJs were saying different shit about each other.
That's true. Although I'm very conflict averse, Andrew, so I'd say something and I'd go run and hide and maybe not come on YouTube for about a week, but that's okay. All right, let's switch a bit to the Canucks and the state of the Canucks right now. Speaking of running away, what's going? I heard you and Sat talk about it today, and I'll say this: I agree wholeheartedly with your take when you're saying. I've heard you say it so many times, Andrew, that you don't need the Canucks to win the Stanley Cup. You don't need them to win every game, but at least be competitive, have pride, play hard, and show these fans that they're still. We got some good players, and it might take a couple of years, but we'll get there. As opposed to living and dying with every single game. Having said all that, do they have a hope in where at all this season, or what are they playing for now?
So I think this is officially after blowing that 3-0 lead to Edmonton last night. Yeah. It's a lost season. It's disappointing, but it is what it is. They got off to such a dreadful start. They looked broken. I mean, we can go back and forth all day the reasons why that is, but they dug themselves too deep of a hole, and they played pretty well over the last few weeks. There's no doubt. Like every game is it's a 1-goal game, kind of thing. Yeah. But they're fragile right now. Now they're blowing leads, right? Now they're going through that. So the hole is too deep. their important guys haven't been good enough. It is a lost season. Now, it's not the worst thing in the world. And hey, if you're a diehard fan, maybe you hate me saying this. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's 56 games. Season's almost over. Honestly, it's half over already. Yeah. There's no fans in the stands, right? You don't have to go to that depressing Tuesday game against Florida with 8,000 people because the team is tanking. It'll be over before we know it, and we'll just miss Canucks hockey again. But I've covered a lot of losing teams, a lot of bad cultures, Calgary, Toronto. I've almost done no playoff hockey in my life, to be honest. Like, that's why this last year's
so it's because of you.
Yeah, totally. That's why this last year's run was so much fun for Sat and I, because they just kept going. And so I think the most important thing is, and listen, we can talk about the GM and the coach and all that kind of stuff, but the most important thing is, your guys that are good, the Pettersson and the Hughes of the world, like, you got to make sure those guys don't take like some big step back. Like, I don't care if they win or lose tomorrow against Edmonton, but, play hard, be competitive, right? Like, Hoagland or Ulevy, those guys got to play better or continue to play well. That's the important thing. Cause man, this is a lost season for sure. Mm-hmm. But it is kind of a season of random too,
Yeah. It's crazy because I remember during the summer when we saw all those guys leave and we, Schmidt comes in, Holtby comes in, Hamonic very late. There are a lot of people on both stations here in Vancouver saying, this might be the season where you don't mind if the Canucks don't make it, because you're right. It's 56 games, no fans in the stands. It's just a weird season overall. And we got bigger issues to think about, i.e. Demko and especially Pettersson and Hughes, new contracts. And then the Canucks split their first series. They lose a couple, but then they come back and they go one game over 500 after beating Winnipeg, after beating Ottawa 3 times. And then there's a little bit of, oh no, we can do this. Maybe all of our changes in the offseason, maybe we're okay. And then we saw what happened as soon as we hit the East Coast and then, or played against the East Coast teams. And now it's back to where kind of we were back in, September, October.
Yeah, pretty much. When they were losing like six, they were giving up 6 and 7 goals a night every night for like 2 weeks, and that was rough. That was because you can't even analyze that. Like you're not even like, well, this guy was good and this is why they lost. It's like they lost because they gave up 7 freaking goals. Like it's not even, you're not even watching NHL hockey at that point. Yeah. It was really, really broken, and so maybe my bar is too low. But like right now, I made up my mind. Okay, they're not making playoffs this year. And so please just stop losing 7-1. And they've at least done that. But it's interesting too. Like I said, this is how broken they were. They were just getting pummeled by Montreal. Right. And so I'm watching the Canadiens and I'm like, man, did I sleep on the Canadiens? This is a good team. They're perfect. They're deep. They got a goaltender. Their defense. I mean, they got 4 lines of guys that can fly. How does anybody beat these guys? And then we're so used to watching the Canucks, like a couple of weeks go by. And then today they fire their coach. I'm like, what? You're firing your coach. You're the best hockey team I've ever seen. But everything's the filter of playing. That's how bad the Canucks were. They're making every team look like a Stanley Cup contender right now.
No, it's true. They've Montreal beat Vancouver 4 times out of 5, but they've lost to Ottawa 3 out of whatever they've done. Yeah. So crazy. Are you enjoying this whole North Division thing?
Yes and no. I think as someone that wants the Canucks to do well, and I do feel for the fan base, because I know, Canuck fans, the worst thing in the world is when other fans get to flex on you. And every night, and it was funny, I said before the year began, I was like, I feel bad for that one team, because there's 7 teams, Ottawa's going to finish last, and everybody else wants to make the playoffs. Like everybody else thinks they're really good. Edmonton has the best player in the world. Toronto always wins the most in the regular season. Montreal had the craziest offseason. Calgary stole all Vancouver's guys. And Vancouver went deeper than anybody did in the playoffs. And Winnipeg, too, is pretty good. Yeah. And I was like, I feel for the one team that's going to underachieve and all of a sudden be like, oh, man, like, we're gonna miss. And then every night, like, who's shoving it in your faces? Flames fans, Oilers fans, Canuck fans to other teams, Leaf fans, right? Habs fans. Those guys are the worst. And then it was 2 weeks into the season, and it's like, you wake up and you're like, oh my God, like it's us. Like we're that team. We're the team taking it between the eyes from everybody else. Yeah. So from that aspect, I've hated the North Division because like every night you get, Leafs Twitter and Habs Twitter and you're losing 7-1. And it's freaking embarrassing for sure.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I love that I'm stuck at home in a pandemic. There's not much to do, and every day is hockey day in Canada.
Yeah.
I love that because I'll two Canadian teams, sign me up. Right, I'll watch Calgary and Winnipeg like every night.
I'm with you. I'm with you exactly what you said about enjoying watching the Canadian teams, and I'm with you. Getting trashed by the other fan bases. I'm making all these stupid little fun bets where I have to vlog about another team or do a live stream, and it's painful, man. It's so painful. Those 3 Toronto losses, and I had to do 3 haiku, like 3 consecutive nights about the Maple Leaf. It was brutal.
Well, because you can't escape. Like, generally, like, oh man, we went to Toronto, we lost hockey in Canada, and then we go to Buffalo and the Islanders and the Rangers, and you can escape for a couple of weeks. So then you come home and we lost at Edmonton, but then you go play Anaheim, San Jose, and LA. But there's no escape. You're playing almost every night, and it's always against a Canadian team, and the bright lights are on, and it's just, when you're losing, it's exhausting.
Exactly. If we were winning, we'd love it even more, and we'd be looking forward to all these games. And
if they were in first place, it would be the golden age of Canucks Twitter. The golden age. Yeah,
I agree with you. A couple more Canucks questions before we get too depressed. What do you? We've seen the tweets from Aquilini about 10 or 11 days ago. I know you talked about it on your show today as well. Do you have any confidence that Benning and or Green will survive the off season?
I think Benning's done. My own personal opinion. I just think it's, the boat traveled too far. I think they obviously need to make some changes, and how on earth is Jim Benning going to be the guy to do it?
Yeah.
I like Travis Green a lot. I'm a big fan, but if you change the GM, chances are the GM changes the coach. It's just kind of what happens. And even what Montreal did today, it's just evidence that you're like, you can like your coach, you can think your coach is a good coach, and it doesn't matter. Right? Like, Claude Julien's a great coach, and he was fired, and he'll be hired somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I like Travis, but I think we've reached a point where all bets are going to be off. I don't think it happens in the season, but I'd be very surprised if Benning was pulling all the strings this offseason. And the only thing that gives me a little pause on that is just because it is COVID. There's not a lot of money going out the door of Frankie's office, obviously. And the last thing he wants to do is pay a guy to go away to pay somebody else to come in.
Yeah. So
that gives me pause. But from a hockey perspective, Jim's out of strikes, right? He's run out of runway for sure. The only thing that would save him would be that COVID financial thing.
And it's such a vital offseason, as you mentioned, Andrew, not only the extensions for Pettersson and Hughes, but you have the Seattle expansion draft there, the entry draft. There's so many vital pieces that are going to help shape this team. And you're right. Do we have confidence that Benning's the man to do it? And on the flip side, for Travis Green, I agree with you. I like him. I know the players like him. I know he's very well respected. But because of COVID, the fact that he wasn't extended, it's almost playing into this whole thing of if you get a new GM, he might bring in his own coach.
And it was so predictable, wasn't it? When he wasn't when he wasn't extended, it was just like, well, you better not struggle, because you know what's going to happen. And not only did they struggled way more than anybody thought. And he looks lost, right? He looks like a guy that is resigned to the idea that maybe this is his last year coaching the Canucks.
Right.
And when it comes to Benning, like, I don't agree. Like, people like to just paint him like this guy's an idiot, right? Like, this guy can't. I don't believe that. I think that he's made some mistakes. I think he's learned from his mistakes. I think he's done some good things, but I think it's been 7 years. You had some hits, you had some misses, but now it's kind of go time. And you had a pretty big swing this offseason that you missed on. So it's not running him out of town with pitchforks. It's just time for someone new.
Right. No, that makes sense. And one more thing about Benning. So we know that Sutter, Edler, Pearson, and Ben are all UFAs at the end of the season. We know that Edler has a no movement clause. He can still be exposed, but probably can't be traded. Do you and we know it's going to be a buyer's market, not a seller's market, because of COVID and quarantine, blah, blah, blah. Are you confident that if the Canucks continue to fall out of playoff spot, that he'll be able to recoup assets for a guy like Sutter and Pearson, even if it's a couple draft picks?
I mean, I don't have a lot of confidence that Jim can pull that off because he hasn't had a lot of great success doing that. But I would think that you should be able to trade Pearson, and you should be able to trade Brandon Sutter for a mid-round pick if you retain some salary. It's not going to be much, but if I'm another team, I'm asking about those guys, but I do it as soon as humanly possible.
Yeah.
Like to me, I've said the eulogy of the season. I'll still do the games. I'll still enjoy the games. I think there's lots to watch. Pedersen, Hughes, all that kind of stuff. But I'm the first team saying, hey, we got these guys. You may as well come get them right now.
Sure. So 4 UFAs we just talked about there, and then much more money coming off at the end of next season with Eriksson, Beagle, and Roussel. So are we talking, Andrew, in 2 years, if we're smart, that we can actually be competitive once again?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think they can be competitive next year. I know they have those big extensions, but your young guys are a year older. Yeah. You have the expansion draft. You do have some space, but I do think I think Nate Schmidt's a really good player, for example. I think he's a really good player, and he hasn't quite looked like himself so far this year. I think he's been really good the last couple of weeks, but it's too little too late, right? It's already over. I think next year, hopefully we're back to normal by the time hockey rolls around, and I think they could be competitive next year, and you won't be getting your head bashed in by the Canadian division each and every night. So, but I would say, and this is why this is a really attractive destination for whoever comes in to replace Jim Benning. It's because given the young core, given there's money off the books this year, and then the big money comes off the books after next season, like you mentioned. Yeah. It is a very enviable position. There's no reason why in 2 years the Canucks shouldn't be a Stanley Cup contender, but you need the right guy pulling the right strings. Love it.
And I can't believe I'm saying I'm actually miss watching San Jose, LA, Arizona, and Anaheim. That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. Like someone else, like Buffalo, come in town for a Tuesday. Are you kidding me? Not getting roasted by McDavid every second night.
It is crazy. All right, Andrew, this has been great. Let's end off with something called the 5-hole, obviously hockey related. 5 quick questions. You can answer these as detailed or as quickly as you want to. But a nice mix of hockey stuff and personal stuff. Number 1, what's the sport that you excel most at playing?
Growing up, it was baseball. Now it's probably I don't do a lot of sports anymore. It's probably hockey now, I guess. I still really enjoy playing rec hockey, and I play out at 8 rinks or Scotia Barn, I guess now with the White Rock Whalers. Shout out to those guys. I'm not great, but I feel like I've gotten better and smarter with age. So it's probably not. It's probably rec hockey, but I don't play a lot of sports, just hockey and golf, basically.
What position did you play in baseball?
Shortstop and pitcher,
nice.
all the great athletes.
Yes, of course. And hockey?
Defense.
Oh, nice. Very good. I play roller hockey. I'm a decent skater, but I have horrible hands, so I never get the puck like two
me
inches
too.
off the ice.
Yeah, we sound the same. We should be B partners.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. We'd be the worst. Well, maybe not as bad as I won't say it. Okay, number 2. You're starting a team from scratch. Are you starting with Elias Pettersson or with Quinn Hughes?
Boy, I would generally say Quinn Hughes. I think the guys like that are tougher to come by than good centers. I mean, Pettersson's really good center. Hughes gives me a little pause this year because he's unbelievable at running the power play, and he's great for your hockey pool, but he's going to be minus 30 this year. I think there's a ways to go. I'll still say Hughes. It's tough to find difference makers on the blue line for sure.
Totally fair. Question number 3. You won't offend me either way because I'm half of each. Do you prefer Japanese food or Chinese food?
Japanese, definitely. Yeah, definitely a sushi guy.
Awesome. Number 4, speaking of dinner, who would you like to go out to dinner with? They're paying the bill, but you're just hanging out for a couple hours. Is it Aquilini? Is it Benning? Or is it Green? Who are you hanging out with for a couple hours?
I would have the best time with Travis Green like probably the most laughs, and I'd enjoy myself the most. But in terms of like fly on the wall, Aquilini for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
That's
Benny
like,
would be just like an old uncle telling stories. I think.
yeah. No, it's between Green and I tell you what, if Benning loses his gig, and I will pay for dinner then. Okay. Then if he can give me the truth serum of like, hey, here's everything that happened under my watch and why, then I would say Benning.
Great answer. Great answer. And lastly, and you can take a second to reflect on this one just in case, is what's one thing that people don't know about you? There's one thing. It can be deep, it can be trivial, but what's one thing people don't know about Andrew Walker?
What is one thing that people, well, they don't realize I was within probably 30 minutes of being with 1040 and bro Jake in the morning. The other one would be, I don't know. I grew up as a pastor's son. My dad was a minister. So I grew up in a very churchy type of background. Yeah. I mean, I'm evolved past that for sure, but maybe that's one thing people might not know. And really, honestly, like I just like to think I'm actually a really nice guy. I'm actually pretty kind and pretty generous, and some people think I'm just this huge asshole, and it's not, it's not true. I can play the role a little bit, but I would say what gives me the most pride is if you were to ask my teammates at work how they feel about me, I think.
Well said.
I hope.
Well, you're the furthest thing from a rear end that I can think of. You've been really gracious with your time, Andrew, and with your answer. So thank you for this. And maybe when this COVID thing ends, we can meet up at the arena or hang out or do something fun. But I appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, man. I really enjoyed it, and only if Marie Huey isn't invited. We don't get along very well, so.
I'll ask you about that off the air. Okay, thanks a lot, Andrew.
No, I love Marie. All right, thanks, Clay.
That's awesome. Okay.